Hey, hi everyone. I hope you all are doing good. So, in my today's session, I'm going to cover the Windows authentication mechanism, which is used on Windows operating system basically in order to authenticate a user against their membership on a Windows Active Directory account, I would say. Correct? Yeah. So, without wasting much time, let's start with it. Okay. So, first of all, uh, how the Windows authentication happens basically. Windows authentication is a mechanism where basically a user is authenticated using the user's Windows credentials, okay, or the operating system credentials which you use to log into your system. Okay, so using that, the system is going to authenticate you. If it is a local system, then the local account DB will be used, basically accounts database on your local Windows operating system. But if it is basically a organization level system, okay, or a set of systems which are related to an organization or on a domain specifically, I would say, like a company domains, then the authentication will takes place on that domain specific accounts database. Understand the difference. If it's a local system, authentication is on the local operating systems accounts database, and if it is a organization or a domain specific system, okay, then the authentication takes place on the accounts database of that particular company's domain. Okay, so that's it about what the Windows authentication is basically. Okay, so what I have done is I have written a simple login service which basically implements Windows authentication. Okay, so let's start with it. Okay, so I have some constants, logon 32 provider default, logon 32 logon interactive. Okay, so what kind of logon I want to do on my system basically using Windows authentication. Okay, and then I have the Windows identity which is coming from system.security.principal namespace. Okay, using this object we will get the identity of the user of the system or a domain basically, okay, which is belonging to a company. And then we need an integer pointer in order to get access to a token. Okay, in case of OAuth 2, okay, specification, we basically use bearer tokens, but here a integer based token will be returned when it comes to Windows authentication. Okay, so that's why in order to handle that, I have taken a help of the system.runtime.interrupt services. From there, I made use of this int pointer basically. Okay, so that's my token handler. And the most important part, guys, I have to do a DLL import of ADV API 32.dll. Okay, so this is the DLL basically, a library, a binary library, which is there on all of our Windows operating systems. Okay, so this ADV API 32.dll file, usually located at the Windows/system32 folder, provides advanced Windows API functions related to Windows registries, services, applications, and user accounts. Okay, and by some reason, if this file becomes missing or corrupt, trust me, you won't be able to use your system itself. Okay, you can't boot your system. So that's the significance of this ADV API. The name itself says it's advanced Windows API, which will allow you to perform a lot of other stuffs associated with your services, registries, applications, user accounts, user management, everything. Okay. Now, in order to perform Windows authentication, I must ensure that I should have that DLL imported, basically. Okay. So another important thing being, these are basically unmanaged libraries. Okay, these are the direct binary libraries which are basically importing, and this will perform a static import over here. Okay, and we will invoke the methods provided by these DLLs. Okay, these libraries are not written in C# and created as a managed DLL. No, these are the binaries. Okay, native to the operating system. So what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm going to refer this method logon user from this library. Okay, this library has this method called logon user using private static external because it's external. Okay, and it's a static method. So what it expects? Okay, it basically expects a username, a domain of your company. password. If it's a local system, you are not required to pass any domain. Okay, you can pass null over there. Okay, logon type, what kind of logon type it is, who is the logon provider, or what is the mechanism of a logon basically. Okay, and then the token which we have over here. Okay, we are passing it as a reference. Okay, and then one more method which I'm going to import is close handle in order to log out the user. Okay, and this particular thing is coming from kernel32.dll. Okay, so this is basically, this particular method is coming from the kernel32.dll. Okay, so that's about importing these binaries. Okay, now in the constructor, what I'm doing is basically I have a Windows identity or reference variable here, which is basically a Windows identity. And here for this identity, I'm going to get the current identity of my logged on system. Okay, because I have logged into my system. So when I do Windows identity to get current, it basically returns the identity, my identity, into this object. Okay, so with the default constructor, I'm doing that. And then there's one more constructor where I pass my username, my company's domain, and then I pass my password. Okay, with that approach, what I'm doing is basically, if you come over here, okay, first of all, I initialize my token handler pointer to 0 with the system.int pointer.0 value basically. Okay, and then I'm going to call this important method which I have imported from uh, advanced API 32.dll or ADB API 32.dll. Okay, so this method is there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this method by passing my username, domain, password, and then what is the logon methods, whether it's interactive or whether it's some other type, and then this particular parameter being what kind of provider basically in order to do this logon. Okay, so what is this logon user method? Okay, the logon user function attempts to log a user on the local computer. The local computer is the computer from which logon user was called basically. Okay guys, you cannot use logon user to log on to a remote computer. Okay, that's not possible. You specify the user with a username and domain and authenticate the user with a plain text password. Okay, if the function succeeds, you receive a handle to a token that represents the logged on user. Okay guys, just like the concept of bearer token, but here it's a binary token, okay, which represents your logged on user. You can then use this token handle to impersonate the specific user, or in most cases to create a process that runs in the context of the specified user. So this process is basically the application which is basically implementing Windows authentication, and that process will run into the context of the logged on user which you are passing over here. Okay guys, so as I already explained, username is basically a pointer to a null terminated string that specifies the username basically. Okay, this is the name of the user account to log on to. If you use the user principal name, that is the UPN format, user principal name format, and then user at the rate DNS name, okay, and the LPS domain parameter must be null. Okay, so what it says is basically if you provide your username, for example xyz at the rate abc.com, then there is basically no need to pass this domain. You can pass it as null because the domain can be extracted from your user name itself because you are passing the email ID there. Okay guys, so second parameter is the domain, a pointer to a null terminated string that specifies the name of the domain or server whose account database contains the username account. Okay, this one. If this parameter is null, the username must be specified in the UPN format, as I already explained, the user principal name format, which is abc at the rate xyz.com. Okay, when you pass this domain as null. Okay, if this parameter is dot, the function validates the account by using only the local account database. Do remember, if you pass dot to this domain, if you pass a string of dot to this parameter, okay, basically your account is validated against the local database, the local account database of your operating system, not on your organization's domain. Okay, do remember this point. Okay, then comes the password, again a pointer to a null terminated string, okay, that specifies the plain text password for user account specified by the username. Okay, when you have finished using the password, clear the password from the memory by calling the secure zero memory function. Again, that's a different topic. I don't want to drag it over here, but you people can do R&D on that. Okay, and then comes the most important stuff, being the logon type. Okay, so the type of logon operation to perform, the logon types basically specifies the type of logon operation to perform. Okay, and this parameter can be one of the available sets which has been provided in the MSG and documentation. Basically, there are a lot of things, guys. Okay, there's a batch based logon process, there's an interactive logon process which I'm using. This is specifically meant for individual user logon, but there are options to perform a batch logon. Okay, and then you can perform a network logon, you can do a new credentials logon, you can do a logon of a service account basically, or the system itself is a service. So if you specify logon 32 underscore logon underscore service here instead of interactive, then it indicates a service type logon. Okay, the account provided must have the service privilege enabled. Okay, and then comes the logon 32 underscore logon underscore unlock, okay, which is used for some other purposes. Okay, then comes the provider basically. Okay, so three types of providers are available. The first one which I'm using is the default one. Okay, so logon 32 underscore provider underscore default basically use the standard logon provider for the system. The default security provider is negotiate. If you have seen in ASP.NET Core based application, if you are using Windows authentication, it basically makes use of negotiate procedure or a provider to authenticate the user. Okay, so that's the thing. And one more important thing being is that, okay, if you pass if you pass null to your domain name, okay, if you pass null to your domain name, in that case what happens is the default provider will become NTLM. Okay, the default one is in the default case, when you are passing some value to your domain, okay, parameter, then it will use negotiate, and if you pass null to your domain, then it will fall back to NTLM provider. Okay, so that's all about it. And then the final parameter become being the token handler, a pointer to a handle variable that receives a handle to a token that represents a specified user. Okay, a pointer to a user's record, I would say, in the database or the accounts database. Okay, which you will use further. Okay, so that's what I have done. Simple call. It returns a boolean whether it's a successful or not. Log on user. I passed all this information. If it is true, yes, the logon has been successful. I will get the identity by passing my token handler, or the token, I would say, basically in simple terms. Okay, and I will assign it to my identity and I will return true, otherwise it's false. Logout, very simple. If the token handler is not equal to a zero value, okay, a integer pointer zero value, then yes, there is a logged on user. So you have to call the close handle method by passing the token handler, which you have received after successfully authenticating yourself. Okay, guys. So if you pass that, you will be logged out. It basically close your token and you will be logged out of your system. So that's all about it. Okay. And during logout, I'm taking some extra caution, like I'm again setting zero value to my token handler. And if my identity is not equal to null, what I'm doing is I'm calling the dispose method on my identity and I'm setting it to null. Okay. And also I have implemented the iDisposable interface on my logon service. So when this object is ready to be disposed, I will call the logout method so that I don't have any reference to my user account once this service comes out of its scope. Okay. So that's all about it. Now we will run and see how it works. Okay. Now I have written a simple console-based application which basically creates a logon service using the using scope, because I don't want to call the dispose method on logon service explicitly. So this using will take care of that. So my username is this one. My password, I don't have the password, and what I'm going to do is I will ask the user to enter the password. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is when user hits enter after entering his password, then I'm going to perform the login service dot login, okay, by passing my username, my domain, and then my password. Always remember, in enterprise grade applications, it's always a recommended practice. You use this approach. You have to pass the username, you must pass your domain name, and then the password. Okay, so that will be a better approach to authenticate a user using the Windows authentication mechanism. Okay, so let me run the program. Let's build first. No issues. Excellent. Now I will run. Now I'm going to enter my password. Don't worry, you won't see my password because I have used a API method provided by .NET to read that password in such a way that you can't see anything. So as you would see, I entered my password. Okay, I I made use of this console.read key method, basically the one of the C sharp's helpful method when you want to enter some sensitive information. Console.read key. Okay, if you pass a value of true, which basically represents, if you see the documentation, the interception. If you pass a value of true, it basically masks all your characters in such a way that as even if you are entering something, the cursor will be at the initial positions only, but still your inputs are being received. Okay, so that's the technique I use here in order to secure my password. Okay, I received the password, I passed it to my login service dot login. Okay, username, I passed my domain and then the password. So on successful login, okay, if I go to this method, go to implementation over here, so which I already explained. So I called the logon service method, sorry, the logon user method provided by the binary DLL, which I already explained. Okay, it authenticated and returned me my identity object. Okay, so that's the thing about how to implement the Windows authentication for your applications, which basically internal to your organization, won't be used by anyone else outside, and yep, which works out for your internal operations of your applications within your organization. Okay, guys? Well, before I wind up this video, there are some useful properties exposed by the Windows Identity Object. Let me show that. Once you have been successfully logged in, guys, I think you can make use of these properties to achieve some extra things. Okay, first of all, the access token which you have received, you can see that, and then the actor, authentication type, you can check what kind of authentication happened. Basically, you can check the claims associated with the logged in user. Okay, device claims you can check. Okay, and most important, and also you have access to the various groups the user is associated with, because when it comes to Windows authentication, most of the times the users are associated with some active directory groups basically. Okay, or security groups, I would say. So with by enumerating over this collection, you can see the various groups the user is associated with. Impersonation level you can see, and very useful properties are this one. Is this a anonymous authentication, or is this particular identity is anonymous? Means whether the user has authenticated anonymously. Is authenticated, very important flag which tells you if it is, if you have successfully authenticated, it returns a value of true, otherwise it's false. If you are a guest user, it will basically tell you that boss, by accessing this particular flag, it will tell you that this particular thing is a guest user. Okay, the user who has logged in. And then e-system, very important, if it's a system login to your service account, then it will tell you that this particular login is a system login. Okay, label names, name will basically represents your username, guys. Okay, which will be your entire username, like abc@xyz.com kind of. Okay, owner, remove claim, there are some useful methods also which you can make use of. Okay, and then the user basically, yeah, this user object contains user related information like the claims, all other stuffs associated. Okay, so if you go here and to, so let me take is well known is account set. Yeah, a lot of information is there. So go to the value, but leave it. Yep, so these are some useful methods and properties associated with Windows Identity class. I hope these will help you when you implement the Windows authentication for your applications. Okay, guys. So one more point to remember, I would like to mention over here, while trying this kind of samples, especially with Windows authentication by entering username and password, if you enter the password wrong more than 3 times, you will end up in locking out your system. Okay, you will, when you try to log in next time, basically it will prompt that the service account or the Windows account has been locked. You won't be able to log in. So be careful when you try this kind of programs. Always try to enter right password. Okay, in order to avoid such kind of circumstances. Okay, because I faced that. That's why I'm mentioning that, because that's worth mentioning over here. Thank you for listening and have a nice day, guys.